You're listening to Pop This, the podcast where two women talk about everything pop culture. Here are your hosts, Lisa Christiansen and Andrea Warner.
There was a revelation made this week by an actress, and I felt like a personal connection to her story. So I don't know if you saw it floating around. Jennifer Aniston admitting that she almost quit acting after one particularly bad movie. And and I was curious, like, what movie could this be, right? She's not in like lots of Oscar films or something, right?
Yeah.
Turns out that movie was Mother's Day.
Oh, it was Mother's Day? People were like suggesting that maybe it was Dumplin', but Mother's Day makes way more sense.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. And so I feel like, it's just, I feel bad because we ended up watching that entire series, right?
Yes, I will never forget it.
And it was not good. We did not enjoy that at all.
I mean, it felt like dancing on a man's grave ultimately, but like also he did that to us. So like as much good as he did earlier in his career and gave us a lot of great things, he also irresponsibly gave us that trifecta of schlock.
Yes, he did.
I'm glad that was before I was on mic, so I didn't actually have to watch it.
Oh, wow. It's
we should do a rewatch of all three.
I think it's important to note again, 8% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. 8%.
And that's generous.
That is generous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well that makes sense actually. That really checks out because I had also heard that and I thought and like I had watched people try to be like, "Oh, it must have been Dumplin' because that was like a couple years ago." And I'm glad it wasn't Dumplin' because I thought she did a fine job in that.
I did. And weirdly enough, full circle, I didn't really notice this, but the revelation was on the podcast Smart List, the one I talked about last week and said
that's right.
Was good with Will Arnett. And
yeah.
So I did listen to some of the Jennifer Aniston, and Jason Bateman introduced her by saying she is one of the more unattractive women in Hollywood.
I mean, Have
you been watching the morning show?
I have never watched it.
I watched 2 episodes.
I've been watching it recently, and the show's okay. It's not, anything you have to watch, but she is great in it. Like, her performance is great. And also her character's wardrobe is fantastic.
Well, it's probably because she just brought her own wardrobe.
I know. It does seem like stuff she'd probably be wearing in real life.
Apple,
this is stuff I like to wear.
Up. Apple won't
pony up. It's just like khaki pants, white t-shirts, and gray cashmere sweaters, right?
Yeah, exactly. She's wearing in one scene, she's wearing this like cashmere robe and matching cashmere leggings.
Yes, yeah.
And it looks so nice.
I know. Yeah, no, it's a good look she has, and it's in that beautiful chic apartment she has in New York and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you? I mean, I know that it's not like based on her, but like, when I saw like the trailers for that show, I sort of couldn't help but think a little bit of like all of the different, newswomen and like different sort of entertainment newswomen who have like been in our lives for so long, and it was giving me a little, Barbara Walters meets Kathy Lee Gifford kind of thing or whatever. And then I was watching a trailer for a movie last week, and I was like, wait, is that woman starring in this film Kathy Lee Gifford? And what
were you watching?
It's a trailer for a new Netflix film with Craig Ferguson and Kathy Lee Gifford and Elizabeth Hurley.
Are you making this up?
I am not making this up.
This is a fever dream.
I am going to watch the heck out of this movie because it looks perfect. She goes and decides to like move into it's very like that Diane Lane one where she like Under the Tuscan Sun. Except I believe she goes to like some like Scottish thing.
Kathy Lee Gifford?
Kathy Lee Gifford. Anyway,
Okay.
It's wild. And Kathy Lee Gifford and Craig Ferguson have that like sort of like little like head butting kind of like romantic tension kind of thing. Like she's at one point just in a long like one of those like oversized men's tailored shirts, wearing no pants. And it looks like from the trailer, he's seeing Elizabeth Hurley, and Kathy Lee Gifford comes between them. And this is a new rom-com for the fall. And
okay.
I've never been so excited, you guys. Like, I just can't wait.
It sounds fascinating.
I want us to do this for the podcast.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really fun and very like ridiculous. And Kathy Lee Gifford, she really almost doesn't. Anyway, she gives me a serious Jennifer Aniston vibe. In like that's the kind of work she's had done on her face, I think. And so she looks almost like Jennifer Aniston's like older sister in the trailer. It's fascinating.
Did you see her? Did you see when she was on Celebrity Family Feud this past week?
No.
Oh well, they had a shot of her. I don't know if it was her nephew, and his pants were very tight, and I think he was really enjoying himself.
That's great. I hope not while he was looking at his aunt.
No,
that's awkward.
But there is a shot they got or someone did, which you can see, is that you can see what's happening, and he's cheering, like clapping, and then all of a sudden he looks down and realizes the situation.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh.
Look at all this full circle stuff. How did this happen?
Hilariously, well, this is going to be even better. The title of the film is "Then Came You."
Craig Ferguson
and Kathy Lee Gifford. It's it's
And
I
Elizabeth
didn't even
Hurley.
realize Craig Ferguson was an actor.
Oh,
He's an actor.
I've seen him before.
That's
I've
how he
seen
got
him in
his
movies.
start. He was like,
Yeah.
he was on the Drew Carey show for a long time.
Yeah, he's his
And-
boss, right?
Yeah, and then he stars in this very charming film, Saving Grace.
I love that movie. Yeah.
Brenda Blethyn has to I think it's Brenda Blethyn. She has to grow marijuana, and he's in it with her, and he's great. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I just thank you for going on that journey with me, and yes, you're right. That all did come full circle, as it were. So what a time.
There's literally not a great segue into our horror month, our scary month.
I mean,
It's
honestly,
October.
all of that sounded like
Yeah,
a horror
that's
show,
a
right?
bit.
Like, I mean, none of that was like you should be afraid.
Yeah, you should
of
be
all
afraid
of that.
And I also want to add, because I sounded judgy to Jennifer Aniston, that I think if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's like I can be exhausted over nothing. And so I can understand how depleting a role must have been to exhaust her. You know what I mean?
Like, we were exhausted watching Mother's Day. Can you imagine acting in it?
I can't. I believe I would find the paycheck to be off, like would somehow ease a bit of the pain.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But she has friends' money.
Yeah, she's got so much money.
I know, friends.
She doesn't need more money.
No, that's probably the greater weight on her, was like, why in the world did I do this? And why couldn't I have got a cool wig like Julia Roberts? Why was I left out of the wig budget?
That's the thing. You sign up for a film. You're like, okay, cool. This stars Julia, and like there's a bunch of cool people in it. Yeah, I can trust this.
Kate Hudson.
I mean, that's not a trust, but that's fine. We have a good segue. It's all a horror show.
A horror show, yes.
All a horror show. You're listening to Pop This. I'm Andrea Warner.
I'm Lisa Christiansen.
I'm Andrea Gin.
And we're pretty excited. This is kicking off our horror month this year. Like in the past, we've done like witches, and we've done just Final Girl, and we've done all kinds of different things, I think, over the past several years. And this month, we are going to attack? That's not the right word. Ease into,
skulk down the hallways of.
Yeah, we're going to skulk down the hallways of Gothic horror. I'm really excited about this. This is like kind of really fun for me.
This is a very, I would say, I mean, someone like, I think we've managed to carve out and find some feminism in like The Last Girl and stuff like that. But I feel like Gothic horror and, feminist theory really go together.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. So that's exciting. We are kicking it off with the 1940 American film Rebecca. And I can read some background and then throw it over to either one of you for a synopsis if you like.
Yeah, that sounds very, very efficient. Yes.
I try. Rebecca is a 1940 American romantic romantic is, I'm going to raise an eyebrow there. Psychological thriller film directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It was Hitchcock's first American project and his first film under contract with producer David O. Selznick. The screenplay by Robert E. Sherwood and Joan Harrison and adaptation by Philip MacDonald and Michael Hogan were based on the 1938 novel of the same name by Daphne du Maurier. The film stars Laurence Olivier as the brooding aristocratic widower Maxim de Winter and Joan Fontaine as the young woman who becomes his second wife. I swear to God, Andrea Gin, until I read your outline, I had not clocked that she had no name. I was like, I opened up the Wikipedia page to double check that something hadn't been missed. And I was like, oh my God, how did I miss that? Anyway, fascinating. The movie won 11 nominations at the 13th Academy Awards, and it won some as well.
Yeah.
Well, notably, it won Best Picture, and it was Alfred Hitchcock's only Best Picture award in his whole career.
Oh, right. Wow.
I mean, that's fair. Like, that's fine. We'll give him his dues, but I don't know. It's fine. Like his wife
nobody knew Alfred Hitchcock was Alfred Hitchcock then, or maybe they did.
I'm just saying
I don't know.
His like wife deserved most of his awards. Anyway,
right? Yes.
All right. Would one of you enjoy reading the synopsis?
Sure. I'll say the synopsis. The story of a young woman who marries a fascinating widower only to find out that she must live in the shadow of his former wife, Rebecca, who died mysteriously several years earlier. The young wife must come to grips with the terrible secret of her handsome, cold husband, Maxim de Winter, played by Laurence Olivier. She must also deal with the jealous, obsessed Mrs. Danvers, Judith Anderson, the housekeeper, who will not accept her as the mistress of the house.
So I had never seen this movie, and I've never read the book. And what a trip this movie is. Like when you get to the part where where the charming, quote unquote, charming man who sweeps this young girl off her feet calls her a little idiot.
I also enjoy the part where he says never become 36.
Oh my God.
Like, what kind of plans do you have for me, Mr. De Winter?
So many quotes. If you were 36, you wouldn't be here with me.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. This is, like the daddy vibe of this whole arrangement between, Nameless and Max is wild.
To be fair, it's extremely overt. She's actually sitting at a table with him, talking about how much she misses her father, her dead father.
Oh, like, I didn't say it's subtle.
There's nothing subtle about this arrangement at all. You know what this movie should be called instead of Rebecca? It should be called Rebound. That's what it should be called.
Or Replacement.
Because I mean, like from the worst courtship of all time, the worst wedding of all time.
That courtship was so rough. I could not. I just like was like, wow, like this woman. The only reason this woman would fall for this man at this point in time is because of her circumstances, which is that she has no family and no name, and she is not. She's like, what? She literally, she has nothing, and this man is a way out of this like sort of servitude that she's in with this horrible woman, Mrs. Van Hopper, and I feel for her on every level.
Because it reminded me, because I read the book when I was like a young teen, and I remember loving the book. And at the time I also read Little Women, and it kind of reminded me of like that same situation where, you know, young women, like the job that they can have when they're young is to be a companion to some rich older woman and, you know, travel the continent or whatever. And but in Little Women, like Jo kind of, you know, rails against this idea of marriage and chooses a different path. But in this novel, you know, the nameless Mrs. De Winter kind of, and it just underlines, like, again, you're just kind of reminded, like, women just have no choices in what they can do with their lives, or very few choices.
Yeah, like when when a man says to you, "I'm asking you to marry me, you fool," you apparently fall all over yourself to say yes. And then later, when he looks into your eyes and says, "A shame you have to grow up," you don't run for the hills and have him committed somewhere.
Okay, to be fair to Mr. De Winter here, he gave her that option in that romantic proposal as she stood in her coat and he was shaving. He said, New York or Mandalay? Right?
Yep.
Like he wasn't like love or no love. He gave her living options.
Yes, it's a geographic, you're right, I guess.
And then you're right, when she didn't get it, then he was, you fool, I'm proposing to you. But he made it very clear. Like, these are your options.
Well, I mean, when you have no options, are the two things that are presented to you as options actually options? like, you know.
Well, Mrs. Van Hopper seemed to be fine with, I mean, I don't know how long that arrangement lasts. I'm not sure what those are, what she was going back to in New York, but.
I mean, both situations seemed sort of like kind of potential for a lot of sort of emotional abuse.
Yes.
And verbal abuse.
Yeah, so. Your option seems great.
Yeah.
But she played, but, you know, like this, like when in the synopsis where he's like playing a brooding man, there was something, I mean, it's a trope that women fall for.
Oh, for sure. Like, honestly, I have done the rescue a damaged dude thing before. It just doesn't go well. And again, not Carlos. He's fine. But like, you know, when you meet...
He did not take you to Mandalay?
When you meet your prospective mate as he's contemplating throwing himself off a cliff, it's like a very high stakes meet cute.
Again, to be fair, she didn't know that until later. He didn't tell her that he was about to hurl himself off.
No, but she can. No, but that's when she sees him. She stops him because she sees him sort of put a foot out, right?
Yes,
and then she sort of like intercedes and sort of saves him, and he's mad at her, and like that's like such a classic like manipulation situation. Like I know he wasn't intending it, but like
yes,
it's wild as Anyway, this is my new version of the gothic meet cute. Is
oh yeah, the gothic meet cute is a totally different beast, isn't it?
Tough one. It's a real tough
I know,
one.
and then every time you go out on a date, it's like, okay, I get it. Her sketch of him was not great. But then you don't just decide to bail on the entire experience.
When he's like, well, you can get out and walk from here. Like,
yeah.
This woman. Oh my god. It's just
yeah.
So AG, have you seen it before?
No, I realized I hadn't seen it before, but I mean, I loved the book, like I said, as a kid, and I'm shocked that I hadn't seen it before, actually, and
I'm shocked too.
it's slightly different than the book.
Yeah, I read the
in
difference.
actually like one key way.
Yeah, Lisa, had you seen it before?
I had. Yeah, I had, but it's so long ago.
Had you read the book as well?
I had same long time ago. Like I went through my Daphne du Maurier stage.
Yes, I think.
Yeah,
I did too.
Yeah, I had to read those. I don't know. Yeah, and also then you read Wuthering Heights, and then you read Jane Eyre, and then you head on over to the Austens. It's a whole thing, right?
I really missed that whole section of literature, which is my own doing, but because I was so into like Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley High, I skipped all the like classic
Wow,
stuff.
I've never heard those compared.
No, I know. I'm just saying this is what I was obsessed with as a youth. And I read some Dickens, and I read a lot of poetry. But I never did the Austens or the Daphne du Mauriers, and I feel like I need to go back and like correct that.
Yeah, I know. They're not contemporaries, though. I mean, I don't want to suggest that. No.
The book is so ingrained in my mind that when the movie started playing, that I had never seen that first line. Last night, I dreamt of Manderley.
Yes,
I was in Manderley again. I was like, I was saying it in my mind as it was playing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. H.E., you have a really great definition that you put in the outline about what is Gothic horror film. Do you want to read that?
Yeah, it's from Jessica King at IndieWire. She described it as often revolving around a female protagonist / victim. The Gothic movie often includes a fraught love triangle. Check. A big house appointed in luxurious and ornate style. Check. Ghosts of the real and imaginary variety. Yes. Themes of sexual repression and or jealousy. Yes. And Vincent Price. No Vincent Price in here.
I love Vincent Price so much. I wish that he was in this and not Laurence Olivier.
He was in our other one we watched. What was that crazy one?
Oh, he was in the like where she's sort of the classic femme fatale, and she drowns. Yeah. She lets her husband's brother.
Yeah.
Heaven Can Wait.
Yeah. No.
Heaven Can Wait, right?
No, because that's another one. I'll look it up.
Heaven Can't Wait. Oh my God. One of the great sort of...
Leave Her to Heaven.
Leave Her to Heaven. That's it. Thank you. Yeah, Vincent Price was in that, but he didn't get to be a creeper in that. He just got to be a
lawyer guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are you going to read the rest?
Oh, sure. But Gothic films are also often extremely beautiful, not just with respect to production design, but in terms of the kind of philosophy they attempt to grapple with. The relationship of the living to the dead and the strange vertiginous attraction. Is that how you say that word? That the spiraling unknown can exert, even as it terrifies the hell out of us at the same time. Gothic films dance along the line between life and death, between good and evil, between salvation and damnation, which makes the best of them so eternally, compulsively, titillatingly enjoyable.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds right.
Well, and that's like sort of exactly the theme of, or like that's exactly sort of like I think all four movies we're going to do throughout this month sort of fit into that in some, mostly, if not entirely. So yeah. There might not always be a love triangle. This one, there sort of is, because I guess it's between the dead woman, the dead woman who has a name, the living woman who has none.
Unless you think of the love triangle between like Mrs. Danvers, Rebecca, and Max de Winter.
Well, it could be a love triangle between Mrs. Danvers, Rebecca, and the second Mrs. de Winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing that the book fills out more and the movie can't, is much more of that twistedness that unnamed girl starts to feel about Rebecca, and the way Mrs. Danvers describes her. She comes alive a lot more. Didn't you find in the book?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, like, Rebecca is more like of a character, and you don't like you have a sense of like, because in the movie it just seems like she's like this ghost that is really kind of held up by Mrs. Danvers as this like perfect woman who knew everything and had everything. And in the book, she's more of like, she has more of characteristics. Like she's a bad person. She's an evil person because she did these things. Like she's not just like, you see how she's not just this idealized version in Mrs. Danvers' eyes. She's also like done a lot of terrible things in her life.
She has like actual complexity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nice. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, and I will say, you know, trust a film to sort of like sap a lot of the complexity out of a three-dimensional character and make them a bit flatter and more like just a bit flatter to sort of like fit the director's ideals of like how he wants to express.
I would say that the success of the movie over that is that like I think Joan Fontaine is incredible. I kind of forgot how amazingly there's this sweet vulnerability about her. And kind of coming to terms with the fact that she doesn't really have a personality. She doesn't really have anything quite yet. And she's what? I looked it up. She would have been in real life making the movie 23 or 22. That's how old she was making this movie. And so having to come to terms with the fact that she doesn't have a personality, doesn't have a look or a nothing yet.
Yeah.
And so I felt like the movie really got that across really well.
Well, and I think that they cast that really well because, like, you know, if you think of, I did a lot of reading about Joan Fontaine and her lifelong rivalry with her sister, Olivia de Havilland. And it was, in terms of sort of like, Joan Fontaine was always sort of in Olivia de Havilland's shadow, like to the point where her mother forbade her from using the family last name de Havilland, said, no, that belongs to Olivia. You have to have a different name. So that's how she ended up with like Joan Fontaine. Like, again, this sort of like nameless woman trying to create, you know, an identity for herself when she's kind of like in this weird absence of family, looking for somewhere to call home and something to build her identity on. Like, I think that, I mean, I'm, you know, obviously applying a lot of context that it doesn't necessarily go into like Joan's performance, but I think it feels extra meaningful as we see her sort of handle the nuances of her character so well that we know that this is something she has like deep familiarity with.
The really funny kind of thought too is that one of Olivia de Havilland's most famous roles is in Gone with the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
And Laurence Olivier's wife is Vivien Leigh, who played Scarlett O'Hara.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So that would have been before this, right? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was like I think the year before.
Yeah.
It came out. Yeah.
So that's a weird little parallel.
And they are still the only two sisters to have Best Actress Oscars. Like, I mean, they're both dead now, but they are still...
Olivia de Havilland just died last month, though.
Oh, I know. She hasn't been dead long. I'm just saying.
No, God, 105 years old or something, wasn't she?
Yeah, no, and she was incredible. But yeah, like they like didn't speak from 1975 on, I believe. They had like reconciled for like a couple years after having a major falling out, and then didn't speak again and then Joan died, and yeah.
Well,
it feels like, and I don't know what you what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna say when I was doing the research for this outline, I read that Laurence Olivier, the reason that they didn't get along on set. There were all these rumors that they hated each other on set, and it was because allegedly he thought Vivien Leigh should have been the lead in this movie.
That would have been such a different second Mrs. De Winter. Like, I can't see Scarlett doing second Mrs. De Winter.
Or Scarlett or Blanche Dubois.
Yeah, like it's neither. I mean, you know, I'm sure she's a great actress. I understand that they're all roles, but you kind of have to you have to understand being invisible, I think, in a lot of ways to play this role.
And I don't know who cast her, but sometimes she would look completely different, like the courtroom scenes with that hat. I was almost didn't recognize her. Like, she had such an unusually bland kind of appearance, but at the same time, very pretty. It was it was like, to me, it just felt perfectly cast.
Yeah, I thought she did a beautiful job.
Yeah, I mean, there was sort of that kind of affected 1940s style of acting where there was a lot of sort of like throw yourself against a pillar and hold on and look in horror. Like, you can't quite comprehend that this is going on, that there was a lot of that, but that was like a different, like, could you imagine doing that in real life? Like, just
I
all of a
threw
sudden...
myself against a pillar earlier today. I don't know what you're talking about. I was just like playing hide and seek with my shadow because that's where I'm at in a pandemic. That's where my loneliness.
I wonder how much of that is like the influence of David Selznick. Because
the producer, he likes that, yeah.
Because I feel like like reading about Hitchcock too, like this wasn't his favorite movie of his that he ever did, because he felt like David Selznick had too much influence and made it like Hollywoodized the movie too much.
Well, it certainly, I mean, it had a blonde, yes. But could we blame her for the downfall of everything in this? No, we could not. So that's different. But then I guess he was working, I would imagine most of his other projects were like original screenplays rather than adaptations of novels, right? So he got, when he started doing like The Birds or Psycho
The Birds is adapted from
it is.
Daphne du Maurier.
Oh, you're right.
Story.
It is.
It's such a weird movie. Like, it's such a weird movie. And there's so much more happening in Rebecca. Like, you can feel it, like how it was developed from a short story versus this is a full novel. And like, I just feel like The Birds could have been like 70 minutes and that would have been fine.
So how do we
it was 120. Sorry, I just want to point out it was 120.
I just want to wonder how everyone feels about like staying with a murderer. Like, would you stay married to him just because you had no other options in a nice house? I mean,
I think she genuinely does love him. That's the problem. Like, she really, like, she's so desperately trying to like talk them into being happy and talk him into
that like, scene when they're watching the movie is when she comes in that, like, almost to me, like, that scene stands out in the movie as something you could like do as an acting class or something, right?
For sure.
When she
for sure.
comes down in that dress that she's ordered, and he'd already expressly said to her, don't wear black dresses and pearls, right?
Yeah.
Because that's obviously what Rebecca wore.
Well, and he also is making fun of her attempts to be pretty.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I was just like,
but there was a sort of I don't know if we were supposed to have a takeaway, like, because, her sister says, does he even like your hair? And she's like, I don't know. And then she says, do you like my hair? And he's like, your hair? Like, literally had no thoughts on it at all. But that whole scene where he's like, I don't know, I feel guilty that I did this to you. And she's like, but we're so happy. And he's like, all right, then. If you say we're happy. It was, I could feel that. It was heartbreaking. That was a real scene.
At one point, he literally says, happiness is something I know nothing about.
Yeah.
But I remember in the book reading, like, in that, when they're in the boathouse and there's that confession scene where he's telling her how Rebecca died.
Yeah.
In the book, it tells you that, like, she feels this immense sense of relief that he never loved Rebecca.
Yeah, exactly.
Like she doesn't care that he murdered her.
Well, and
she just cares that, like, he didn't.
There's no more jealousy involved now. Yeah. I'm number one. Yeah.
I am the real Mrs. De Winter. And that, I think, comes through really well in the film. Yeah. Like, when he's like, you think I loved her, I hated her. And you can just, you see, not
the
a
angels.
Look of horror.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's like this glow in her eyes. She's like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, I can deal with, like,
We can sort this
woman?
out. Yeah.
You murdered this woman? I get it. This is what men do.
And she was pregnant with your child?
Yeah.
You
big deal. No big deal. I'll be a better wife to you, and I won't have to worry about this whole jealousy thing.
Yeah, because you hated her.
Because, do we all assume that they stay together after the end of the movie?
100%. She's never leaving him.
Does he have, where's his money? So Manderley's burned to the ground.
It must be family money, right?
There must be, land, I guess he has, because he and whatever that Brian or whatever, they're always out working on the estate. It was Downton Abbey there or something, right? Counting sheep and collecting taxes or something.
I just figure he's rich and he gets his money because he's always had it. He seems like the kind of man who's never really worked.
Because do they rebuild Manderley, or do they just go build a chic new house over on the cliff, or what's the deal? Or do they just get the hell right out of there?
I mean, I feel like they move on, and
They just move back to Monte Carlo permanently.
No, because he finds it gauche.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think he could go... I think he could go somewhere. I feel like, he's not as attached to Mandalay necessarily.
You can go buy another castle, basically.
Yeah, he can go buy another castle. And I don't know how insurance worked back in 1940, but I mean, now that he and that's the other thing, this man who's a real jerk. And yes, whatever Rebecca's faults were, nobody usually deserves to be murdered by their husband. And
then get off.
And yes, and then be shamed.
So conveniently.
Okay, so that was the key change from the book to the film.
Yeah.
Is that in the book, he confesses to actually deliberately murdering her. Whereas in the film, he makes it seem like it was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's, because of the sort of what is it called? The
Hays Code?
The Hays Code at the time.
Yeah.
You can't let a murderer get away with murder.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, the big reveal that it turned out that she wasn't pregnant with another man's child, that she had cancer and was going to be dying anyways, and that she wanted to incite him to murder her.
Which doesn't make any sense at all.
Which, let's just think about Rebecca as a person. Why would she do that? Well, in
the book, I think it's she doesn't want to die a slow, lingering death. She wants to go fast.
I mean, and I guess maybe she wants to
crazy woman. She blazes.
And she wants to take him down with her. I can respect that, frankly, because I feel like he deserves it. But I just it's just. I mean, they throw in every little thing she has this lover who is also her first cousin. She must deserve to die.
Well, after meeting that guy, she did, because that guy was.
I mean, he's terrible. He's also terrible.
Oh my God, Feldster? Was that his name?
When he just steps through the open window, I laughed so hard at that particular. I thought that was him making a weird acting choice, and that Hitchcock didn't even know that was going to happen.
I love how he always calls her Danny too, Mrs. Danvers. Hello, Danny. Yeah,
that made me so happy. I think when I was reading about the book versus the movie and what the differences were, the idea that Mrs. Danvers had raised Rebecca from childhood and had always sort of been a part of her life versus had just sort of fallen under her shine when Max brought her home. I think that's a really interesting distinction as well, because it doesn't, I mean, I think obviously there's the queer reading of Mrs. Danvers and a trope of the queer disturbed older spinster woman is the real ghoul of it all, when actually this man for sure murdered his wife and is cool with that. And so
in real life too, Mrs. Danvers, the actress, is probably 35.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at her going, what? How old are you, Mrs. Danvers? And where's the Mr. Danvers? Why are you Mrs. Danvers?
Well, it's a polite distinction that a lot of
Yeah.
Or I get that's a spin-off that we need to see.
Oh my God. Like how we have this new show called Ratched and it's like the like pre-Nurse Ratched. We want the early Mrs. Danvers. You guys,
I think they talked about that before, though. They have. I feel like that's been, because it's kind of like we're going to do Jane Eyre, and there is that wide Saragossa Sea, right?
I've never watched it or read it.
Okay,
so it's going to be real new for me.
I wonder because there's going to be a new Netflix adaptation being released on October 21st with
Kristen Scott Thomas.
And Lily James and Armie Hammer.
Yeah. And I wonder if Kristen Scott Thomas is going to develop Mrs. Danvers.
Well, he said it's not going to, because Ben Wheatley is the director, and he's like a director I really, really admire, like all of his really unusual films he's made. Really, really dark. So I think that he was drawn to this story for the darkness, and so I feel like it's going to be a lot more twisted.
It feels like Kristen Scott Thomas is perfect to play Mrs. Danvers, though.
Now that makes more sense rather than this 35-year-old. I mean,
yeah, Kristen Scott Thomas at least is like, I think she's around 60 now or something.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean, that makes it a little more.
Yeah.
She just has like that perfect embodiment of severity.
But also a charm. It's such a charm.
Oh, I love her a lot.
Yeah.
I think she's great. I just, I was, well, and that's, I was really excited about the Netflix adaptation that's coming. And that's one of the things that sort of like sparked us to do Gothic Horror Month is, well, also, but the other thing that I always forget is like, AG, you are a huge Gothic fan.
Yeah.
Like this is like a real thing for you, like as an area of interest for you in literature and film.
Yeah, mainly books, and I love Southern Gothic novels. You know, like Faulkner, and I've been obsessed with them since I was young. So yeah.
Did you actually get through The Sound and the Fury? Because I tried, and I had a hell of a
absolutely.
Time. Oh boy.
As I Lay Dying is one of my favorite novels.
Amazing.
Well, one of the
and that's
things
why Carnival. It's
a TV show.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I still have never watched that, but I'm going to soon. I think
you have to. Yeah,
I'm really excited about that. One of the reference points you have here is a quote about it's feminist reading. So I'm just going to read it. It's a little bit long. Even if it will never be clear whether or not du Maurier agreed with feminist critics' interpretations of her novel, Rebecca is an important feminist work insofar as it studies the ways that men dominate women. The narrator feels that she's constantly being watched during her time at Manderley. Her smallest action is measured against a social standard for how proper ladies should behave. And perhaps most tellingly, we never learn the narrator's real name. She's only ever known as Madame de Winter. The narrator's identity is subsumed into her husband's name and family history. Du Maurier suggests that heterosexual marriage is itself a sexist institution. The woman not only takes her husband's name, but she's also forced to structure her new life around the husband's existence. And I think this is a really great analysis of this film. And I mean, I say as a married woman, I do think that a lot of heteronormative marriage is a super sexist institution, and you have to, as a feminist, figure out ways to make it work for you if you want to be married. It's a very strange thing that we see in the pandemic. Like a lot of people, especially if you're a heterosexual couple that has children, and how much of like the workload is falling to women in the pandemic versus the men, and the childcare, and then also the schooling. We've seen so many articles about that, and sort of like the inequality in labor distribution, and how like, and then if you are the woman who is in this sort of situation, you have to do the additional labor to fight back against it, which is also exhausting and very tiring. So I think this is a very like timely movie to watch. It's on YouTube, so you can like stream it for free. So that's pretty cool. Like I think that there's a lot of sort of interesting stuff happening here.
Oh, there is. And I also think it just they recognize that it's fine to have this power imbalance, and that, he didn't like Rebecca because she was a strong woman. I mean, it sounds like she was a bit twisted too. But also, he was drawn to her. And he said that he was drawn to something about her. But then when he was married to her and she was fully exerting who she was, he kills her. And now he has a new bride who has nothing. I mean, and, you know, let's hope, like, she was only 20, like early 20s, literally no family, no money, nothing. And how easy it is just to scoop this person in and then fall in love with her when the opposite was Rebecca. Like, it is really a depressing view of the sort of the two ways that women get viewed by men.
Well, and I mean, a lot of, like, I don't think that Max loves the second Mrs. De Winter. Like, he seems very bored by her. But I mean, maybe that's just like the institution of marriage as viewed through this book and this film, is that like your wife is there to manage the homestead while you go out and do business. And that's it. Like, it's not.
To be fair, again, to Maxime, you know, he might be a little bit more relaxed as a husband now that that fear of being caught as a murderer is off his shoulders.
So now,
because I really seemed to weighed him down a lot. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it's weird how, like, once you've murdered your wife, and you can be found innocent eventually through, like, completely unscrupulous means, just like a real weight off, so you can be like a better husband.
I can really commit myself to you now without all that stuff. Like, it was a lot all the time. I try to sleep. Also, there'd be her face.
Like, can you imagine if, like, a few years down the road in their marriage, when the second Mrs. De Winter has matured a bit and feels more...
She's 36?
More confident. Yeah, she can... Every argument is just like, but you murdered somebody.
Yeah, I remember the sister says that he's got a bit of a hair, like a trigger for his rage. She mentions that.
She sure does.
Yeah, and so we're going to see a bit of that, and she's definitely going to have to make some decisions going forward, how she's going to contend with those things. Personally, I would get him to write down, I murdered someone, fold that up, put it in a vault. And when things got weird.
Like, I forgot to pay the gas bill this month, but you murdered somebody, so.
Right?
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, like, so, you know, arguably you could say that the power imbalance is then much more fully in her hands, but she has no power socially. You know what I mean?
She was the character, though, was starting to get a lot, like the dress she was wearing at the end. She was starting to feel a lot more like, once you said she was finally like, oh, you never loved her.
Yeah. Woo, what a weight off. I mean, it's honestly, it's great that they found each other, but like but the thing is, like, even if she tries to hold this over his head in any way as leverage, no one's ever going to believe her anyways. No. Like, she knows that he's fully capable of murder. And that he has never known happiness. And she may spend the rest of her years trying to give that to him because she thinks she can heal him. But, like, her life is a very, very sad, like I see this as, like, just nothing really good coming for the rest of their marriage.
Yeah. I mean, I think that having Mrs. Danvers out of the way is going to be a help.
But, you know what? Actually, you're right. That helps. Because that scene, can we talk about the scene where she tries to convince her to jump out the window?
Oh, gosh. After she makes her dress up like a dead woman.
Well, I mean, I was a little like, not that I'm blaming, you know, the second Mrs. De Winter, but I was like, you don't trust this woman. You know she doesn't like you. You're going to take a cue from her that she's giving you good advice to dress up as this portrait. Please don't be so daft, young lady.
That's her whole charm. She's really dumb.
I know.
Naive. Sorry, naive.
I know. It's the naivete I get. Like, it's the whole thing. But, like, I just, oh man, when she's standing behind her, just like whispering, like, just like so evilly encouraging her to throw herself out a window. it's so mean. But I also like, I just love the performance of Mrs. Danvers so much.
Yeah.
That it actually was affecting. Like I felt the tension, and I felt, normally in those kinds of scenes, I'd just be like, all right, fine. But that, like, the performances were so good that I actually like felt some potential risk here.
Why was she kept on? Like, what was her job? Because when, like, after
she's running the house.
She's running the house?
Yeah.
Oh, right. And then, okay.
But
so she's supposed to get a maid, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she's supposed to get a personal maid.
Yeah.
But also that scene where she's going through all of Rebecca's stuff in that glorious room and just like pulling it out and showing it to the second Mrs. De Winter and being like, you could never, touch any of this, because she was amazing. Like, I thought that scene was incredible too. Like taking out her lacy underwear and like rubbing it against her face.
Oh my God, that scene.
It was great.
Look at it. Look how delicate. Have you ever seen anything? It was, I didn't even know what I felt. I'd never seen anything like that before.
I mean, and it's a really that's definitely another scene that you could do as monologue.
Oh yeah.
When you're doing like an acting class. Like that's, it's so provocative, and it feels so risque for 1940.
Also, that room, like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Floor to ceiling windows. Like, what is that?
I mean,
those draperies? I mean,
if you had a wing of a house, like, manderly to yourself with that room and your own space and your own glorious stuff, it's like, Rebecca's life.
Right? I got Mrs. Danvers here when I'm lonely. It's like, come on in. We're going to pour yourself some wine. We're going to watch some Netflix tonight and just chill. You and I, Danny.
I mean, I definitely think that, like, they could have had, like, some, like, some mild sexual relationship. Like, I feel like Rebecca would have enjoyed the attention of someone obsessing about her.
Oh, yeah. And it sounds like everybody in the house did, too.
Yeah. I mean, I also do enjoy, I wish, yeah. You know what? I do want to see the early Mrs. Danvers series. And I want us to make that together, guys.
Okay. We're on that.
So we like to, does this pop?
Pop, big pop.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
I don't think, interestingly enough, we've talked about, because we are going to do Jane Eyre and many, I think this is only the second time I can think of this movie being remade.
Yeah, I can see it being a very complicated film to read.
Yeah, maybe. Mm-hmm.
Because you have to get that tension right. You have to get all the casting right. You have to, it's, yeah.
And, well, I mean, the genius is, like, the titular character is just made up in your mind. It's like a figment of everyone's imagination. And so, you have to sort of be able to depict her on screen without ever actually showing what she looks like.
Yeah, that's true. That is a remarkable feat.
I wonder if they're going to, in this one, keep that same structure of not like having a big portrait of her or something, or flashbacks. I wonder.
I mean, I hope so. I think it is more interesting to not see her. And have everyone else's interpretation of her.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Because that's part of what was great about reading the book, is just imagining in your head, like.
Well, and this poor woman having to try and piece that together.
Yeah.
Like, who was this? Person, and you definitely have to make it a period piece, because if it was set now, there'd be like 9,000 photos of her. No, 9 million photos. She'd have an Instagram account.
She had it. She had an Instagram account, and she also had her own reality show. And
you'd be RDW at Manderley. Boom, boom.
She did a season on Dancing with the Stars.
All right. Well, we also love to leave our episodes on something we personally recommend. AG, do you want to go first?
Sure. Oh, yes. I watched The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open. It's available on CBC Gem, and it's just a beautiful, moving film, and everybody should see it. It's wonderful. It's a very heartbreaking, moving story, but it's so well made, and the story is so well told. Yeah, highly recommend it. Yeah, I was going to originally recommend VIF, but VIF is going to be over by the time this podcast comes out. But I did want to mention that I saw the opening film Monkey Beach, and that was excellent as well, by Loretta Sarah Todd. And it'll probably be released in some manner after the festival, so people should look out for that. It's an adaptation of the Eden Robinson novel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, those are great recommendations. Lisa?
Yeah, so I am reading a novel right now called Circe, and I think it's just a couple of years old, and so it is a retelling of a goddess story, so like Greek mythology. So just here just reading the quick synopsis here: a bold and subversive retelling of the goddess's story. #1 New York Times bestseller, is both epic and intimate in its scope, recasting the most infamous female figure from the Odyssey as a hero in her own right. And it's just an incredible book, and I'm really enjoying it, and I highly recommend it. And it is by Madeline Miller, if you want to look that up.
Cool. Thank you. I am recommending a record. It's out October 9th, so it'll be out the week that this episode comes out. And it's by the duo Okan, which is Okan. And the album is called Espiral, Espiral. And they are two artists who live in Toronto. They are a married couple, Elizabeth Rodriguez and Megdalise Savine. And they have a Juno-nominated first album from 2019 called Sombras. And their new one, Espiral, is out October 9th. And it's just this like incredible record. There are vocals, but it's also this Afro-Cuban Latin jazz. They're multi-instrumentalists. They just like make beautiful music together. And this particular record, the focus is on celebrating the strength of women. And it's lush and it's vibrant and it's just gorgeous. And I highly recommend it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Okan.
That sounds
Okan.
amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds great.
Right now.
Okay, yeah, I was just looking it up too.
I
Okay.
highly recommend it. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We have very much enjoyed coming to you from at home in quarantine.
A lot longer than we ever thought, but
a lot longer. And you know what? We're going to keep doing it.
A long road ahead of us.
So long.
Yeah.
You can hang out with us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. You could email us at popthiscollective@gmail.com. We got a DM from a listener friend of the podcast today with a suggestion about something they'd like us to think about doing. So, whatever way you'd like to get a hold of us, do it. And we will, we'd love to hear your ideas.
I just had a surprise guest pop up here on the screen.
And you gave your surprise guest the microphone.
Yeah. For people who can't see, that's my little Cash. He just popped up here, or I lifted him up. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Cash, for helping me out here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Andrea Gin for co-hosting and producing this podcast with us. We're at home in Vancouver, and so very grateful to get to make this for you. Because otherwise we'd just be sitting at home, really, and it would get sad. So let's all be sad together and then happy because we got podcasts. So is it actually podcast day, isn't it, that we are
Today
recording?
specifically is International Podcast Day. This episode won't come out till next week, but we've observed it by hanging out together.
We did.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.